go? All right. Well, thank you for being here today. My name is Betsy Reed, and if you read the program, you know a lot about me, but I'll just introduce myself. I am a speaker, an author. I am a leadership professor at a university here in Barcelona. I'm obviously not from Barcelona, but I also have a British passport. I was born in the United States, but I've spent the past 18 years of my career working in social and environmental issues, but most of my life has been committed to working in social and environmental issues. So I do not work in the events industry, but I am an admirer of the events industry, and I've worked with clients in the events industry for the past 6 or 7 years on sustainability, on how to have a more sustainable social and environmental impact. So I'm going to try not to restate what the experts, the people who work in events, are saying to you over these 3 days. I'm going to try to add something new. So we live in unusual times, and I'm going to try to give you a slightly unusual session based on what I know is important, what I believe is important, and what I hope I can bring to this room. So along with being a sustainability consultant, a leadership mentor, a professor of leadership, I'm also a mindfulness teacher. And the pandemic has completely changed my life, as it has changed a lot of yours, no doubt, and definitely your industry. I see some nods. But it's also really brought me back to how important me is in the world, and you are in the world, and us as individuals, starting with ourselves. And so I bring a bit of mindfulness practice to everything I do now. At the beginning of my classes, I teach fourth-year students at a university here, so they're 21, and we always start the same way. My leadership sessions, my corporate workshops, we start the same way, and we're going to start this way today. I call it the Google Start. So if you know, big meetings at Google always start with a minute to get present, to drop in. Because there's this great researcher at MIT who has found in his big research lab that we actually can't multitask, that we think we can, but it just means that we do a lot of things badly rather than a lot of things well. So I'm going to be radical and invite you to maybe consider for the next half hour putting away your phone. I don't care if you tweet about me. I don't care if you Instagram me. Give yourself the gift of attention. And I know you have lots of meetings to arrange. You have stuff going on, probably things you're juggling back in your home geography, but just give yourself a break. Allow all the tabs in your brain to close and just let yourself be present, because this is going to be a session about you. I'm not going to tell you a lot of snazzy facts or try to impress you with what I know. I'm going to make this a dialogue with you and how you feel and who you are and how you are going to be in your industry and in the work that you do and bring to the world. So get comfortable. I'm going to stand on both feet. If you want to, you can close your eyes or just look down and soften your eyes for a moment. And we're going to take 3 breaths together. So take a big inhale through your nose. Exhale through your mouth. On your next inhale and exhale, just let your shoulders and your mouth, your forehead and your eyes relax. And then on that 3rd breath, just take a little moment to notice how you feel right now in your body. Do you feel stressed or tired, excited, bored? Just check in with yourself. And then take one final breath all the way into your belly, fill it up, and then exhale. So a tip, most of us live in stress. So if you start to notice when you check in that your breath is in your chest, you're in stress. And that means that the most important parts of your brain that are responsible for creativity and things like empathy and connection and joy are offline. So simply by taking a deep breath into your belly, you're signaling to your nervous system and your brain that you don't need to be ready to run. Because when your breath is trapped in your chest, it's there because we have this, well, kind of evolutionary design flaw that keeps us in fight or flight because we think something's trying to kill us all the time. But animals run from danger and then they shake and then they go back to normal. We don't do that, so we live in the state of heightened stress. So a little neuroscience before we start. We have this thing in the middle of our brain called the amygdala. I call it the brain almond. It's almond-shaped, it's in the center of your brain, and it's what's responsible for fight or flight. So when we're anxious, when we're stressed, that takes over. And it turns off our frontal cortex, which is the part of our brain responsible for creative thinking, empathy, and like I said, joy. There's a little part in the left middle part of the frontal cortex that actually manufactures joy and happiness. So when you're in stress, not only can you not think creatively, you also can't really feel happy. So if you think about living in a heightened state of stress, how can you create connection and joy and create for other people if you're living in stress? So that's just a hot tip on how to turn off the anxiety and rewire your nervous system. It's like a reset button, just taking 3 deep breaths, which is why I start that way. So moving on. This is not my usual speech, by the way, but it's one that's increasingly becoming the speech that I give wherever I am. I was in a room full of leaders, a leadership collective I'm part of last week, kind of giving the same speech, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to rewrite my speech, and I think you could use this one too, because it's about who you are in the world. So I've got my notes here because this is a very new speech for me. We'll have a little bit of time for Q&A at the end, so if you do have any questions, please hold them. And if you have any paper, I encourage you to jot down some things that I'm going to ask you as we go, or write them in your phone, but try to stay off the internet so you're focused on this session here. So obviously, I've said I'm kind of a fan of the events industry because I've worked with people in the events industry. I've been to enough events to know that you are some of the most creative, innovative, and magical people I know. Most people who work in events who I know personally and have worked with, you love what you do, and you bring so much to the world with this connection that you build. You help people to connect with themselves, with emotion, with experiences, and with each other. And so just sort of setting the scene, obviously, this pandemic has changed the world for all of us. But it's also still unfolding what a mental health impact that has had, and what an impact it has had on a sense of isolation. And so we know that people are craving connection. The number one reason people go to therapy is because they feel isolated. And we know from some research done by Stanford that since at least 2014, social connection has been in decline. Keep in mind, that was long before a pandemic killed social connection for a lot of us for 2 years, still ongoing for some people in some regions. And that sense of isolation creates a real physical and mental impact. So people who have more social connections, this research from Stanford shows, increases your physical and mental health and also your longevity. Having more social connections helps you to live longer. So I say that to add to what you already know about the value of connections, because that's so much of what you do in the events industry. But did you know that it actually helps people to live longer, to actually be happier, to be healthier? So what you do is super important. And I want to just state that at the beginning. It's stating the obvious, but I wanted you to know some science. Because what I'm going to say is that I believe you're having a moment as an industry. This is an incredible time in which you can really shift gears, change how you do things, and truly change the world. So a lot of my work over the past few years has been in climate change, which is a really cheerful topic right now, obviously, because I'm not going to lie to you. We are quickly reaching a point of no return where we're not going to be able to hit targets to keep climate changing permanently and devastatingly. And I used to work a lot in behavior change. For example, I set up the National Recycling Campaign for the Scottish Government, and I used to run a national food waste campaign. So I've done a lot of work in policy and behavior change. And the accepted wisdom 10 years ago was, incremental, slow change, little individual actions will add up. It's not enough anymore. So what we need is big, radical change. What we need is to be able to step into discomfort collectively, to do things differently, to do things in a way that maybe we don't know if it's going to work, because the way that we have been doing most things in this world might be comfortable, it might be the status quo, but it's not working for us collectively. So you'll have a lot of speakers talking about environmental impacts, and I am big on that. But for me, environmental impact matters because it's the thing that makes or breaks an environment in which we can thrive as human beings. If our ecosystem, if our environment is out of balance, we are not going to survive as human beings. So I'm an environmentalist because I love humans. But let's focus mostly on humans today in this talk and about the moment you're having, because you can do things the way you've always done things, or you can do small things, but it's not going to be enough. Or you can really challenge yourselves and each other to do big things, but with incredible creativity and joy, creating connection as you do it, creating great events as you do it. But it has to be different than the way you've done it. So obviously there's a lot going on. We've talked about climate change, we've talked about a pandemic. A lot of you suddenly had to become tech professionals when in-person events stopped, and you had to figure out how to keep people connected. But you're here, is the good news. You survived that pandemic. You managed to stay in an industry you hopefully love. And now is your moment. So the first industry I ever talked to about having a moment was the communications industry. It's an industry I know well because much of my career has been in communications, public affairs, campaigning. And in 2012, 2013, sustainability was really hitting the radar. So there was starting to be a rise in public awareness of and expectations that businesses and governments would do something about social and environmental issues, and they wanted to hear about it. And as a result, there were more and more communicators being pulled into the work. And I've worked with communications agencies, and if I know nothing else about communications agencies, is that they never say no to something that will make them money. So as there was this proliferation of briefs on communications, there were more and more agencies, more and more communicators who didn't really know and understand the complexity of the issues behind social and environmental work, communicating about it. And they therefore became what I saw very clearly as the chief propagators of greenwash, purpose wash, what we now know as woke wash, saying things that couldn't be verified about companies, about government actions. And this created great reputational risk. And it also just didn't reveal the truth that would push them to do more on social and environmental issues. And so I sort of felt obligated to step into the breach. And so I got involved with the PR Communications Association in the UK, which is my PR association. It's the biggest in Europe. And I started offering trainings for communicators about how to communicate social and environmental issues effectively, to not actually make things up that they weren't sure were true, to not just make things sound good, look good, but to genuinely be able to verify that things were genuine. The work going on was real. And then a publisher called me and asked if I wanted to write a book about it. And when a publisher asks you if you want to write a book, you don't say no. So I wrote a book called Communicating Social and Environmental Issues Effectively. The clue is kind of in the name. And it was a really practical guide. But there were two things that I wove into that book that I want you to remember. The first was be human in everything you do. And I think your industry is creative enough, you're pretty good at that. But a lot of us forget we're not machines. Other people, we're trying to connect with humans. We each have our personal values. We each have our personal lives. The pandemic has showed us that, as many of us worked from home. Maybe our professional values and our personal values didn't align, and we discovered that, and we want them to align more. It's something I'm seeing a lot in my work with leadership teams and leaders. They're suddenly realizing they don't bring their personal values to what they do. So be human in everything you do. And the other thing that I wove in there was that you have the opportunity, as the communications industry did 5 years ago, and they're still stepping into, to be leaders. Not just to deliver or execute, but to push back when somebody asks you to do something that you know is not going to have a sustainable impact or doesn't consider impact. When I first started working with people in sustainable events a few years ago, there was truth and concern that if you said no, if you pushed back to a client, they would just hire someone else. And that was the case, right? You couldn't insist on not having single-use things. You couldn't insist on things that might cost a little bit more, but would actually, in the long term, have a positive impact. But now is your moment to really step into that, being strategic, seeing yourselves as leaders. And even if you are lower down in the hierarchy of your organization, or even if you're afraid you will lose a brief or lose a contract by questioning, by pushing back, by insisting on doing things more sustainably, what the world needs right now is your values and your humanity and your courage. Because if you do it and you do it and you do it, and more of you are doing that, it's going to change what clients ask for and expect, your employers ask for and expect. Because also think about this. The people who come to events are human, and we see these consumer trends about how people want to purchase more sustainably. They want to live more sustainably, but sometimes they're not sure how. So when they show up to an event, it's not that those expectations are completely separate from what you're doing. They will love that. They will sign up for that. They will value that. And then that creates a beautiful feeling of connection, but also of feeling like they're part of something that really counts, that doesn't necessarily have to be put away in another part of their brains that they don't think about. I have the conscious part of my consumption, and then I have the part of me that just has fun or likes a party or a glossy experience. But you can bring the two together. You can help people to have fun in a way that actually has a completely positive impact. I know there's a lot of talk these days about net zero in your industry and in every industry. But I would challenge you to go for positive impact, not just net zero, not just neutral, because I'd say the time for that is past. What we need is positive impact. We need impacts that give back to the communities in which your events take place, to the environment, that don't use sort of net zero on resources, that actually somehow create something instead. You're creators. You can do this. If any industry can do this, it's you, which is why I love that I'm getting to stand here in front of you today. It's not an accountants convention, it's events people. So you do have some of the greatest capability of any sector to take this and run with it and to create something beautiful. So I want to sort of turn it back to you, and I want to ask you a question. So you can close your eyes or just think to yourself, what are your personal top 2 to 3 values? Just think about that. Do you know what your 2 or 3 top values are? For me, it's society, community, fairness, freedom. So maybe you have some similar values, but just seriously think about this, because I'm actually going to ask you a bit more about this in a few minutes toward the end of my time with you. You might want to write those down. You might know them very clearly. But it's important to know your values, because that's part of you, being human in your work. So the thing that I really want to go into now is being, because it's a piece that's been missing in our world. We are all about doing, right? And I am from a place called Wyoming in the United States. It's cowboy country, and it's all about doing stuff. And there's literally a billboard in my home state that says, if you don't do it, no one will. So I come from doing country, and I've had to learn that it's more important to be first, to reflect on who you are, what you want to do in the world, and to connect to your own humanity before you run off and do things, before you run off and deliver things. So we're all familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals. And they have been mildly successful, I'm going to be bold and say. And a lot of people have realized that there's a piece missing, that it isn't creating transformational change the way that has been intended, at the speed that needs to happen, to have an impact on gender equality and child poverty and hunger. And so there's a group of very smart people, academics and governments, researchers, NGOs, and they've formed an organization called the Inner Development Goals. And it's about creating the internal capacity to grapple with these complex social and environmental issues and to fit alongside the Sustainable Development Goals. So I'm involved. I live here in Barcelona, and we have the biggest Inner Development Goals hub besides the headquarters in Stockholm. So I encourage you to look up Inner Development Goals, because the first pillar of that is being. And then it's thinking, and then it's connection, and then the last one is action. So there's a point to that sequence. It starts with being. Who are you? What do you value? More than money. That's how you know your values. What do you value more than money? What do you want people to say about you at the end of your life? Not that you did, but about you. Because it's really about who you are in the world. And we don't have time to focus on fancy pants accomplishments. What we need is people who are showing up in their humanity and doing things based on that, creating connection based on the belief that everyone has value, everyone has values, and we're going to bring those to our work, to our professional lives, to events. So let's keep on going, because we talked about the value of connection and why people need it. We talked about why it's important to be before you do things. So I want to talk about your comfort zone, because that has a lot to do with what we do and how we are. I'm obsessed with discomfort. I produce a podcast called The Discomfort Practice. The clue is in the name. So I interview people, Olympic gold medalists and CEOs and other people, about the value that discomfort has played in shaping who they are, how they show up in the world, and what they've done as a result. And it's a really beautiful insight into how valuable discomfort is. Because if you think about it, your comfort zone is just where you're comfortable. It's not necessarily good for you, because you can do a lot of negative things in your comfort zone just because you're used to it, just because your nervous system is wired to think, okay, how do I get from point A to point B as quickly and easily as possible? Because our brain requires energy. So we've evolved to use as little energy as possible. So we program shortcuts to things. So it takes taking moments like these to become conscious of what our comfort zone is and what maybe isn't serving us, individually or collectively. So I always like to ask people, what's your comfort zone? And I'll ask you about specifics that might be in your industry. What's your comfort zone in terms of pushing back when the person you're doing an event for or a meeting wants you to do something that doesn't quite work in terms of positive impact? What's your comfort zone? Would you push back or would you just do it? What's your comfort zone in taking your own values to work? Do you feel comfortable being out about those? Or is it still something you think, well, I have my job and then I have my values? And what's your comfort zone in terms of being human in your work? Because you're not a machine. And to me, it's really important to make the point that not being a machine means you need to take care of yourself. Soldiers don't get sent into battle hungry, tired, in bad shape. It's about taking care of your body, taking care of your mind, making sure you get enough sleep, making sure you take some breaths so you're not constantly stressed so that your brain can work optimally. And then it's about creating a vision for yourself. So one of my favorite interviews on my podcast was with an Olympic gold medalist snowboarder. And we talked about how she got there, how she trained for that. And visualization was a really key part of it. So this is something that elite athletes use. It's not just woo-woo meditation teacher stuff. Visualization really works. So I asked her, she pictured her gold medal run. She visualized the entire thing from when she left the gate to every gate she went around to the finish line. And she pictured her time and she pictured herself winning a gold medal. And then it went exactly according to plan. And I do that before I'm chairing a big event. I visualize the entire thing so I know exactly how it's going to go before I step on stage. And then it always goes that way. So I would say to you, and I'm going to give you the opportunity in our final minutes to visualize some stuff with me. So you can close your eyes or simply look down, but I invite you to just take a few moments. This is the home stretch. Just take 3 breaths again. And let yourself really drop in and notice where you are in your space. And now just picture a moment in your life that was absolutely beautiful and joyful for you. One of your happiest memories. Who was there? What were you doing? And now how do you feel picturing that really lovely moment, that lovely memory? Where do you feel it in your body? This is a somatic movement when we tap into our intelligence in our bodies. Maybe you want to place your hand somewhere in your body where you feel that. Maybe it was a birthday or a time with a loved one or something you accomplished. Try to take a little mental snapshot of that feeling. And now picture something that you have coming up in your work life, an event, an occasion, something that you need to do and you can do more sustainably or more creatively maybe. So take that feeling of joy, of pleasure from that happy memory and apply it to what you have to do. So at the end of the thing you need to do, the event you need to plan or whatever it is, you feel that same way. You've done a great job. People are happy. People have connected. You have lived in your values and you feel like that. And now take a moment to think of how you got there. What did you say yes to get there? And then what did you maybe need to say no to? A yes leaves the door open for things you need to say no to. Everything you say no to leaves room for something you need to say yes to. So start to let that vision just get some color, come to life. What does great look like? What does great feel like? And then how did you get there? Because that's how we create reality. If you know anything about neuroscience, Dr. Joe Dispenza maybe, this works. This wins people gold medals. This helps you to change the world by creating more sustainable impacts and connections. Take a few more breaths and just live in that vision if you want to. And when you're ready, come on back. So in the final few moments, I just want to say this. Transition is coming. Transition is inevitable. We have to live differently. We have to be different in the world as human beings. We have to run events differently. We have to do everything differently because the transition is going to happen with us or to us. Climate change is happening. Social inequality is rising. We're seeing the rise of populist governments being elected. Things are falling apart a bit, but that leaves way to do things differently, to pick up the pieces and put them together in a way that actually works for the majority of people on this planet. So are you going to grab your moment? Are you going to actually change the world? Because you have such a great seat to do this. You have the potential to be leaders, to challenge where things need to be challenged, to create beauty and connection that people desperately need right now in this post-pandemic. I don't even know if we are post-pandemic, in this pandemic time we're in, where people have lost connection, where people have been isolated, where we're required to do things differently. So remember how you want to feel at the end of your work. And then go before you're ready. So this is a very live thing for me right now because I am in a personal time of transition. Saturday, I put everything I own in storage here in Barcelona, and I currently am homeless as of today. I gave back the keys to my apartment yesterday. I have a one-way ticket to Mexico in January, and I have no idea what happens after that. But all I knew was that this is what I needed to do right now. So I'm finishing my semester teaching at university, and then I am stepping into the unknown. And I'm not sure what I'm going to find there, but I know that it's what I need to do. And when people ask me why, I can't really tell them, but I just know it's a transition I need to make in my life to get to the next place, whatever that is. And so just trust. By stepping into a transition, you will land where you need to. There's a great quote by Terence McKenna. I don't know if you follow Terence McKenna, a great philosopher, about how such things are like throwing yourself off a cliff, but then landing on a feather bed. So go before you're ready. Make the transition before you're ready to a better way of running events, to challenging yourself, to step out of your comfort zone, to seeing yourselves as leaders. Because that's truly what you can be, and that's what the world needs. It doesn't need any more status quo. It doesn't need any more happy with a net zero impact or a negative impact. What we need is for people like you, who are some of the most creative people I know, to bring that to making the world really work for everybody. So please do that. That's my request to you as a fan of your industry, as someone who wants to go to more sustainable events and not feel guilty when I look around and see bottled water and things that I don't need. So please, step into that leadership role. Thank you so much for being here today. I will be happy to take any questions or comments if you have any, but thank you for your time. Any questions? Comments? Not too many people walked out, so I'll assume you didn't hate it, so good, good. Just remember, you can always take 3 breaths and life gets much better. Any questions? Well, feel free. I will linger for a few minutes. Feel free to come talk to me, but thank you again for your time. I appreciate it.